Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Inga Cotton. I'm the founder and executive director of San Antonio Charter Moms, and these are Charter Moms Chats. We've been going live to share information with families that they need to know to keep their kids learning in spite of the challenges of the pandemic or whatever new opportunities are arising. And we've been talking about some of the great school options there are in San Antonio if you're looking for a school for your child for this school year or for the coming school year. And today we have two special guests. They are the co-CEOs and co-founders of The Gathering Place, which is a charter school that just opened in the fall. So this is their first year of operation. And so above me on one side is Asha, who has a long Polish name. Let me try it. Asha Klekowicz, right?
Exactly, beautiful.
There we go. Okay, good. All right. My Chicago friends will be proud. Okay.
They would be.
And then on the other side above me is Ryan York. And so you see, so yeah, Asha has Polish name and is from Chicago, right? Ryan is from, Tennessee?
Yes, Middle Tennessee, just south of Nashville.
Okay, there you go. Okay, and as you can tell from what Ryan's background, he really literally has a music background, literally and figuratively.
You never know when you're going to need someone to fill in for stand-up bass, so it's always acceptable.
Exactly, right. So yeah, so they, and I remember meeting you all. Oh gosh, I think I talked you guys into going walking with me inside the Whitty Museum because I was parenting and working at the same time. And yeah, I remember you guys were just really good sports about it and like seemed really amused by all the cool stuff they have at the Whitty. And I'm really glad that I work in the sort of the education field because nobody seems fazed that I bring my kids with me to stuff all the time.
Yeah,
you everywhere. So
right.
When there aren't, wait a minute, something's missing.
And take a hands-on project-based school and put us in an interactive museum with bicycles running across the ceiling, and we are fitting right in at home.
That's right. Now it makes sense. Like that was the perfect place to meet up with you guys.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, cool. Well, what I want is to give you guys a chance to tell your story about the Gathering Place. And I should mention that there's a link in the description of the video to a blog post that we all collaborated on that has nuts and bolts information, how to get to the website, how to enroll, a description. But I want to hear from you guys. So if you could talk about the mission and vision of the Gathering Place, like what kind of school is it?
Sure. I'm happy to kick us off. So we are the Gathering Place. Our mission is to nurture and celebrate the inner brilliance within every single child. We are also an arts and social justice school. So that's one of the things that makes us so unique. Our kids have art every single day. The way we approach learning experiences, the way that we approach teacher development, staff development, the culture within our school is very heavily rooted in equity and social justice and recognizing that it's not just about awareness, but it is about awareness, action, like changing and bringing to life the world we want to see and live in, as well as the reflection to continue to investigate our own belief systems and paradigms. And then, as Ryan mentioned a little bit earlier, we also learn through project-based learning. One of the ways that Ryan and I both started in education was as teachers, as district teachers. And we were very used and trained on how do you run pedagogy, how do you run learning experiences that are textbook-based and worksheet-based, and you're driving towards the state tests. And after being in ed for so many years, we realized that all that does is kids are disconnected, teachers are disconnected, everyone feels a little bit bored and disengaged, and like that's not how learning needs to look like. It can be hands-on. Our kids are building things. Our 5-year-olds are using saws and hammers and drills, and they're creating the change they want to see in the world. And they're learning all the academic skills, but in a way that is authentic to them, that tells their story, and is just like their imagination coming to life. And so that is who we are as the Gathering Place.
That's wonderful. Ryan, do you want to add anything to that, or you want to hop on the next question I had was more about project-based learning, about like how does that? Okay.
I'll add one piece, which is also, so Asha already mentioned that our kids have art every day. Once the elementary school is fully built out, which will be over the next year and a half, we'll have dance, theater, visual art, and music. And then we also have a really robust and beautiful wellness program as well. When you think about a school, you, regardless of what you say your focus is, you at the end of the day are there with the whole child. And when you think about the scope of the whole needs of a child, it also has to do with wellness. And that's why our kids have a wellness class every day. So we have yoga. So our kids are enrolled in either yoga or cooking and gardening. And we have a full cooking kitchen that looks very much like what you would see on MasterChef, where kids are actually learning how to not only cook, but we have a garden that kids are able to work in and really bring in this element of wellness that's important. And that's mindfulness, that's physical wellness, that's health, that's nutrition. So far this year, our kids have learned how to make and cook kolaches. They've made homemade sushi. They've learned how to do hollandaise and eggs Benedict, which is now like out of the stratosphere of what I know how to do as a cook. I wasn't sure if that would happen this year, but it certainly has. And it's beautiful for kids to get to see, the whole journey of food and this sort of life cycle very much so in front of them.
I know one of the pictures you sent us to put in the blog post, and it shows a student using a knife to cut a tomato, and
Yep.
I think it's fantastic. Like I've encouraged my kids to, let's see, their favorite thing to slice is cucumbers. That's but they each have their own chef knife in their favorite
Nice.
color. Right? My
That's
son has a
great.
green chef knife. My daughter has a purple chef knife. That also, then they don't fight about whose knife is whose. Right?
Yeah.
And
That's
they love
fantastic.
seedless cucumbers, and so just about every day, one of them is slicing up a seedless cucumber. So there you go. And like I just have to not watch, because as a
Right.
parent, I'll be like, "Don't cut your finger," and so I'm just like, "It's fine. Just don't." I'm just gonna walk away and let them.
Yeah, lots of safety routines and norms and building up to that.
Exactly.
But you can, and then when kids have that trust, it actually really changes the way that they end up interacting in the classroom, because they recognize, that they're being seen for the capable and the agent beings that they are.
I trust them to do risky things within bounds, but and with like you said, like safety, and like there's ways to build up to it, not just throw them in with
And I think, Inga, that's actually one of the big pieces, like at the heart of project-based learning, is you trust children to take risks. You trust that children will sometimes make mistakes and figure out their way through it with the support, with the guidance of the caring adults around them. And so our kids use professional tools. So you heard me share this, you heard Ryan share this, but I mean, we starting at 5 years old, so in kindergarten, our kids are using actual saws, actual hammers. They're using PVC pipe cutters. They are using knives. They're using cooking equipment. Because one of the things that we've seen is so often in schools, all you do is talk about something or look at pictures of things. One day you'll do this. One day you'll get to touch this and really experience it. And like, we reject that. For us, it's like our kids are ready to use those tools now and today. And like, if you think about it, like when kindergartners are able to use all the cooking equipment, all the construction equipment, laser printers, 3D printers already in kinder, imagine what they can do by middle school and high school, let alone adulthood, because they're experiencing things that many of us as adults have never had an opportunity to experience, because all we've ever done is talk about it or think about it, versus our kids are living it at age 5.
Yeah, one of those kindergarten classes, just the progression this year, and this has been, the weirdest year in education ever, but still, one of our kindergarten classes, I remember it was like late October, early November, right when we started bringing kids back on campus. And, there was a whole station with a teacher that was right there, and they had these like smaller hammers, and it was all about just how do you hammer a nail. And each kid got a chance, and, they were very nervous, and it was like, boom. And it was like, okay, we did it. All right, we got it. And then a couple of days later, it was like saw, and it's like hand over hand. Here's how we saw a piece of wood real lightly. But then by their next project, the kids were really worried about water conservation. They had been talking about where does water come from? How do we store water? They dove into the aquifer and really just coming to understand, like when you turn the faucet on, like how does water come out? That's not something that just naturally happens. And the kids came up with the idea of they wanted to build a water collection system on the building. We don't actually have any type of gutter systems or anything. And so then the kids were like, we could build our own water collection system to collect water runoff from our buildings into a barrel for our garden. And that way we're conserving our own water, which I don't think they ever would have thought of if they hadn't already had the opportunity to see themselves as capable of doing that. And the kids were like, we could saw the wood, and we could cut the gutters, and we could hammer it up at an angle. And then by their next project, they started studying food deserts and understanding about how food works in the city. And the kids were like, we could build a food pantry. And now by the end of kindergarten, the food pantry, they just finished it yesterday. I wish our campus wasn't so big, or else I'd run over to the other building and show it to you. But it's beautiful. It is absolutely beautiful carpentry. And the kids did it. They sawed the wood. They did the measurements, the plexiglass, the bolts, the hinges. And all of that is just like them seeing their own power grow exponentially as they continue to work hands-on as agents of what is capable of being built in the world by them and their own ideas coming to life.
Right. So it ties together their sense of what are the problems in the world that need solving, and then also having a sense of their own agency, that if there's a problem that needs solving, we're not just going to look at pictures and we're not just going to talk about it, but we can actually like roll up our sleeves and make stuff. And then how satisfying that is. And I think there are adults still who haven't had that experience, maybe didn't have that kind of educational experience, or as adults haven't found their medium for that. And yeah, I hope that's one thing I've noticed about the education movement, like as like new school models open in San Antonio, I hear adults say like, wow, I wish that had been around when I was a kid, and then, but my advice to them is basically like, it's not too late. Like you can learn, like I've learned different work habits that I've picked up from, talking to teachers, and be like, I need that in my own life. Like I can be more organized. I can be more proactive about this. And I think if there are adults who feel disconnected from their work, maybe they need to ask themselves, like, what are the problems that they need solving, that they feel passionate about, and what are the things they wish they could build, and find classes like how to, it's never too late, even for adults. But I'm really happy that you guys are doing this with young children. So remind me, which grades did y'all open with? It was kinder through second?
Yes. So we opened kinder first and second, and then we'll be adding a grade each year until we're fully grown kinder through 12th grade.
Okay, got it. Okay, yeah. I was, and that stuff is in the guide, but I don't always have it in the top of my mind. But yeah, but I think it's great that that path is there, right? And I'm really excited to see like eventually what the high school is like, what those kids are up to. That's going to be something.
We often giggle. We joke that we think our kids are going to build the high school. Everything the kids are making now. Folks are like, where's the facility going to be? What's it going to look like? What's the program going to be like? I'm like, you know what? Give us a few years, because our kids are going to answer every single one of those questions.
Right. Will it be 3D printed? Will it be built by robots? Who knows? Who knows? Right. Will it be a fungus that grows into a building? I don't know. Right.
It's a good project.
Yeah, it's all possible. I'm not ruling anything out. Right.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's great. I think that was a great explanation about project-based learning. And I love the example of like going from, the nail to the saw to gutters to the pantry. So yeah, maybe after this, you could send me a picture of the pantry and I can add that to the
Absolutely.
blog post. That sounds really cool. Okay. So the next thing I wanted to ask about is, so I think Asha touched on this, that social justice and equity are really core to what the Gathering Place is about. And the way you approach that is trying to like empower the teachers to create learning experiences so that the children are thinking about social justice and equity. So I was wondering if you could like talk more about that, because that is something not seen that much in schools in San Antonio. A lot of schools are kind of cautious about how they approach current events. It varies a lot. So I think but it's one of the things that is really strong and unique about the Gathering Place is having a lot of courage to talk about these issues, even with young kids.
Yeah, absolutely. I can start that for us. So one of the things that we believe is silence or not diving into topics is actually being complicit in the inequity within our world. And that is what the majority of our school systems are here in Texas and nationally. Folks are so afraid to talk about topics that they actually shut them down. But one, our kids are already talking about it. Two, our kids are living it. It's not like the inequity happens to somebody somewhere. It happens to our kids. It happens to our staff. It happens to us. And when we disconnect that and say, hey, we're not going to talk about the inequity in our world, in our schools, we're actually creating schools that are not realistic and don't represent the lived experiences of our kids, of our caregivers, of our staff, and of our society. And so to us, that's just one of the first starting points in our philosophy. And to something that you've been mentioned earlier about like problems, our world has enough problems. And when you think about the majority of curriculum that is present in schools, it's all made up problems. It is Asha has 14 watermelons, Ryan has 18 melons. How many fruit do they have all together? Like the likelihood, unless like one of us is a farmer, the likelihood of us having that many melons is like not realistic. But instead, even some of the things that you've heard Ryan share, and I'll share a couple of examples in a moment, like water conservation, especially in a city like San Antonio, that is so critical. It's critical for our livelihood. It's critical for our animals. It's critical for our ecosystem. It's critical for our businesses. And we don't have answers. Like we don't have answers in San Antonio. We don't have answers in the United States. We don't have answers globally. And why aren't our kids diving into those questions instead of these like made up questions that have been created to simplify the complexity of the world? And so we do dive into all of it. You also heard the pieces around food pantries. That means like our kiddos and the learning experiences we were designing as kiddos were looking at maps of San Antonio. They were actually mapping and plotting where are the grocery stores, where are food deserts, what does that mean? How does that intersect with race, ethnicity, with socioeconomic status, and correlating those pieces together, because it's not just random. Our like social inequities aren't just random. And these are conversations that we begin already at age 5, again, because it's our lived experiences of our kids and it's the real world. Another example, in one of our first and second grade classes, one of our projects actually really centered around what does equity mean? Like you'll ask adults, and how do you define equity versus equality versus fairness? And most adults are like, I'm not sure. And our kids spent an entire quarter really diving in and defining for themselves, what does equity mean? And of course, there's like how is this age appropriate, developmentally appropriate? So a lot of our avenues to understand this were through the lens of kindness, through fairness, which really represents like the neuroscience and the biology of where our kids developmentally. And over the course of that quarter, like again, we intersected literacy, math, science, social studies, all the different pieces. But through this umbrella experience of understanding equity, understanding fairness, understanding kindness, what does it mean to have an equitable classroom? How do we treat each other and our classmates equitably? Our kiddos actually created their own puppets. They created their own videos. They learned how to make voiceovers. They learned all the different pieces about audio equipment, and they put together a multi-scene puppet play explaining what is equity and actually acting out those different pieces. And like this is again, these are our first and second graders. So from an age perspective, this is what our 6 to 8-year-olds are working on. And you get all the pieces about academics, but more importantly, you are diving into those conversations. You are building awareness, you're building action that many of our adults, many of us are afraid to do. And so we just remain complicit. While instead our kids are actually like completely blowing our minds and our paradigms with their wisdom and their understandings, and they are finding their own way to define and navigate the world, but while talking about very real topics in our very real society.
Yeah, I think sometimes, like, I talk to a lot of families. I think sometimes families are concerned that, or even like, talking heads in the education world, they present what I think is a kind of a false trade-off between like, are kids learning the knowledge? Are they learning skills? Is talking about social justice or equity taking time away from that? Like, is there some kind of false trade-off between, like, on the one hand, this is a school that's giving kids the knowledge they need versus are you spending time talking about these other things? And I think what you guys are demonstrating is that by doing project-based learning and making the work that the kids are doing relevant to what's happening around them in the real world, that you're getting both, and that is the ethical and responsible way to teach, is that you want kids to be aware of real world problems, and along the way they will get the knowledge that's relevant to their life, and you're not ignoring the problems that are out there in the world. Would you say that's fair, how I described it? Okay.
Yes. And I think one of the way that you mentioned it a moment ago, sometimes there's these concerns about our children getting the knowledge, not only to what you shared, which is the answer is yes, of course they are. They're actually getting even more. There's also a question of, even if you were to like distill this into a very traditional, maybe like classical approach or something of like, but it's about the knowledge. our push there and our question there is like, and to what purpose? Like our purpose is to our collective, like to humanity, to making the world and life better and more equitable and safer and more free of harm. And that's to us like the driving purpose of knowledge. And to even share an example, one of the things that Ryan and I had done pre the Gathering Place heavily intersected with the computer science world. And computer science and tech comes up so often as like 21st century skills. This is so important. And all of those things are true. And we got to spend a lot of time in that computer science world, in the tech world, talking to folks leading or in businesses all around the United States that are considered the most innovative, the most groundbreaking. And I remember having conversations with folks, and this was like, a few years back, and one of the big pieces of technology that was about to become mainstream was face recognition, and for facial recognition to start coming into our cell phones, how banking apps work, etc. And one of the things that folks were talking about is they were having a really big problem with facial recognition because it was only recognizing white faces and primarily white male faces. And I say this as a white person and as a white woman. And then everybody was like, but why? But why does that happen? And to me, it was just it exposed what does inequity look like when it's so heavily seated in our school systems, in our society, in how we think about 21st century skills. Like what that means is we had a whole host of folks that were building this like groundbreaking technology who, first of all, themselves were primarily white and male, and that in and of itself like represents a lot of inequity. And then second of all, didn't have the awareness to even think about for who are they designing these products? How are they making sure that their products are inclusive? Who is part of the design process? Where are they prototyping? Who's giving feedback? Are we making sure that our technology is representative of everyone? And I mean, this was an entire industry, and this was like Silicon Valley, and they totally missed. But that happens in every single industry. And I think a lot of it happens in this pursuit of, but knowledge, but this test, but this other thing, when really we should be questioning the purpose of why education, why knowledge in the first place. And it is for that collective responsibility to humanity. And that's where we have a long way to go as an education field.
Right. I think that I've heard people say that, like that the STEM fields are somehow objective or that equity is not as relevant there. But I think the example you gave is that no, equity, it matters everywhere. And that the technologists also need to be aware of inequity so that they can, combat them, and not just because, like you said, if you ignore it or you pretend it's not there, then you're just perpetuating the bias that's already built into the system.
Yeah. And it's a very specific point of privilege to be able to look at inequity as to be able to question whether or not inequity is important, right? Like it is oftentimes people in positions of power that are, that benefit most from systems of privilege that then are able to say, like, well, we don't need to talk about this. That's not as important as this test. But like to whose experience and how do we make sure that the people making those decisions are representative of the community that they're serving?
Yeah. Okay. Well, great. I know this is a topic that comes up in the Charter Moms discussion group often, and I appreciate that families, the current families, they will explain, and I think this is sort of part of the challenge of like my role overall, like as a Charter Moms, as this communicator who talks about schools, is just to explain to people that like it's a new world. It's not how it was when we were growing up. There's a lot more different types of schools out there. And just be aware of what each school model is like. Don't just rely on a reputation, but actually talk to the people at the school, like talk to families whose kids really go there, and then find out where does the rubber meet the road? Like what activities are actually doing, and then parents can have that comfort level, or the caregivers can feel like, yes, I know what we're getting into. This is what I want. And I hope that it challenges people. Like if they ask themselves, well, do I want my kids talking about that at school? If that makes you uncomfortable, ask yourself why that makes you uncomfortable. And maybe you need to question your assumptions about,
Yes. One of, and this is something that Ryan and I did not create. This was something, that we had heard and read, but I think it really sticks and illustrates a lot of like the TGP experience. And this is true for any element or thread that you explore around social justice and privilege. But we'll have families sharing with us who may identify as white or as Latinx, sharing, hey, we don't want our kids to learn about race and ethnicity. Like we actually, that's a hardness of the world that we don't want our kids to understand or explore for many years. And the push there is we have so many of our kids that have already and are continuously experiencing racism and colorism. And that is their lived experience every single day. And so if we have children that are young enough to experience it, that means that all of our kids are young enough or old enough to learn about it. And that often really changes paradigms of how to think about it and engage. And just what is our responsibility to also recognizing that sometimes like the earliest times that colorism and racism, anti-Blackness appears is at ages 3, 4, 5, 6. That means kids have had 3 years, 4 years, 5 years of being conditioned, of living in a society that is very inequitable. And so the world's not going to wait 10, 15, 20 years until somebody who has a lot of privilege is ready to speak about it or build their awareness. That actually begins the moment our kids are born and are walking through this world. And it's our responsibility as schools to create that space to have those conversations and to create that safe space to have those conversations now instead of waiting until they're adults.
Yeah. No, I think that's one of the things that I really wanted to make sure that came across in the blog post and came across in this chat, that you guys are not afraid to have those discussions with young children. And I think this is something where I think like as adults, like it's important for us to be humble and stop and listen to the educators. And I mean, like of course I am a parent advocate, and like I believe that parents know their children the best, and that's why I believe in school choice and parents finding schools that are the right fit. But I think it's also important that for parents for us to be humble and listen to the educators that we encounter. I've learned so much from the different school founders and teachers that I've met in the San Antonio community, and I'm sure it even goes broader than that. Although I don't get out much, I'm mostly in San Antonio, but so my request to caregivers and parents listening to this is just keep an open mind, and don't just say, oh, I don't want my kid learning that, but like ask yourself, like, why does that make you uncomfortable? And maybe it is time to have that discussion, and be open-minded about how the educators are approaching this, because y'all are experts on child development, and how kids take in information at different ages, and there are ways to talk about it. I know that in our household we've been pretty, basically nothing's off limits at the dinner table as far as dinner table conversations, and we talk about current events, and we don't try to protect our kids from what's happening in the world. I want them to know, and if they feel scared, I want them to be able to tell me what they're scared of, and we'll talk it through, and we'll talk about risk. We've had some interesting discussions during the pandemic, and like why the rules are a certain way, and what people are afraid of, and what our fears are. And I don't want them to like become adults and go like, why did you hide this from me? Or like, why did you try to protect me from this? Because now I'm unprepared for the world. And and we're coming from a place of privilege, but I want them to be aware of that and conscious of that, and be looking for ways to assist people in their community, rather than just sort of gliding through and taking the privilege for granted. Yeah. Well, we could talk. Maybe sometime we could have like a whole nother discussion just about this. Just as part of
I think we've gotten the question too.
Yeah, I also want to like give people like practical information about like I mean, like you talked about the cooking and the like project based and stuff. So one of the cool things in the blog post is you all have a graphic that's like a day in the life, and it kind of shows the cycle of activities that kids do on campus. So I was wondering if you could actually touch on what are the activities. And these are also some of the ways that set the Gathering Place apart from other schools.
Yeah. So a day in the life of a kiddo at the Gathering Place. School day opens up for families at 7:30. We have 7:30 to 8 to grab breakfast. We work with an amazing provider called Revolution Foods that has some of the healthiest school meals in the country, so kids can come in and grab breakfast. School day officially starts at 8 o'clock, and every day starts with Morning Circle. Morning Circle is a huge part of building community in the classroom. Morning circle is time where there are specific skills taught about emotions. One of the biggest things happening in elementary school is learning what are emotions. How do you identify them? What do you do with them? How can you identify them in other people? These are skill sets that most of us adults oftentimes still really, really have a hard time with. And you can teach kids explicitly how to identify and name emotions and what emotions are, and what's the difference between frustration and anger, and what's the difference between sadness and being tired. And those are things that kids really have to spend time with. And Morning Circle is a beautiful place where that happens. It's also a time where you really get to know each other and you get to hear each other's stories, and kids get to share a complexity of themselves that oftentimes doesn't get to get shared at school. And that builds trust and relationship and community. From there, the kids have 2.5 to 3 hours of project work time a day. So that's the bulk of what they do throughout the day is work on projects. And we've already shared the food pantry and the rainwater collection. We had another class in the last project cycle want to bring in more bees to help the pollinators across the campus. And so they actually learned how to work with backhoes, or not the big electronic ones, but like the hand backhoes and shovels and tillers to be able to actually tear up the topsoil, create a boundary, till the ground, make sure the nutrients are there, grow plants from seedlings, plant the whole garden. It just came together yesterday and it's beautiful. We have another class that wanted to create a reflective space in their classroom. So each kid got like a 1-by-1 piece of fabric that they then created art on. And one panel was a piece of art about who they are. And the other panel was a piece of art welcoming the next class of kindergartners. And then the kids learned how to work with sewing machines and actually sewed together these like quilt-like tapestries, and then built wood frames with hinges to create like a tent. We had another group of kids that were really worried about the damage that our construction was having on the roly-poly habitats on our campus. We had this huge outdoor play space. Our campus is like 7.5 acres with all of these old heritage oak trees. You can probably see it, out my window, all of the old trees out there and everything. And so
people from my generation who grew up in San Antonio know it as Apple County Fair. Although I never got to go, but yeah.
Yeah.
But that's for the Gen Xers out there. So.
Yeah, home to the largest indoor Ferris wheel, which is a very interesting concept if you think about it for a moment. But so each class does their own projects, and each project is really driven by the interest of kids. Our teacher did not start that project or did not lead into planning it thinking it was going to be about roly-polies, but she noticed, how much the kids were really invested in roly-polies and started asking all these questions like, oh my gosh, all these big machines are digging up all the dirt. What happens to the roly-polies that are there? And do they die? And it suddenly became this like big conversation about how do you help transplant bugs as safely as possible to other parts of the campus. And so, 2.5, 3 hours of working on projects that are totally dependent upon kid interest. Kids have 2 30-minute recesses outdoors every day. And so lots of playtime, lots of tree climbing. There's always 20 or 30 kids in trees at our school. And then, of course, as Asha had already shared, we have an art class every day and a wellness class every day. And each of those are 45 minutes. Healthy lunch with Rev Foods as well. And then, am I leaving anything out, Asha? Yes, I am. We have the huge dedicated block for literacy that's very specific to, we use what's called the Lucy Calkins Readers and Writers Workshop. And so really big on like developing storytelling capacity and helping kids really fall in love with literacy, which is like what we focus on. We do have a phonics program. We believe in the science of reading and getting kids engaged in decoding and phonemic awareness, but it's all couched in these thematic units that really bring kids into the beautiful world of literacy.
And then one of the other pieces, I'm not sure if you've mentioned it, is around how we approach numeracy. So we approach it we do conceptual numeracy. So much of math in traditional schools and in traditional approaches is just you're memorizing algorithms and you're memorizing shortcuts. And for us, like we are piecing together that conceptual understanding of numeracy so that our kids have that foundation. Because as they're weaving in math into projects, as they're experiencing math in real life, when you have that conceptual numeracy, it's like a springboard that you can go into so many different directions versus like, oh, the thing I memorized about flipping and inversing and multiplying, what do I do next? And so we also have dedicated time for numeracy, and our approach is through the lens of conceptual numeracy.
Well, I'm sure that for the food pantry, they had to use some math to figure out how to make all the pieces fit together. And then, but it's a real world thing. It's not just like, oh, okay, that's like, these are just a bunch of numbers, it doesn't matter. It's like,
Yeah.
oh no, it matters because these pieces need to match up.
Yeah, absolutely. Not a worksheet that just ends up in the trash can.
Let's see. Oh, so we have a couple questions about the school day. So this touches on what Ryan was saying. So a question about, let's see, school hours. I don't know if it's necessarily long hours. Is that accurate? I guess, let's see, you said it was 7:30 for breakfast, or?
Yeah, so the day starts at 8. So breakfast 7:30 to 8 is optional. And then one of our caregivers just drop in the answer. We have the best caregivers and families that are always really responsive and supportive to other folks. Pick us at 3:45. We do have after school care, so we partner with the YMCA, and the YMCA has a YMCA site on our campus, which is really cool. And so we have the YMCA does after school care from 3:45 until 6:30 or 6:45.
And then just one quick piece. One of the pieces is actually also expanding the definition of like long school hours. So a lot of us, when we picture our elementary schools or our middle schools or high schools, like we imagine, you walk in and you sit in a chair and you're not allowed to move and you wait for the bell to ring and you can only go home when the bell rings at the end of the day. And we don't associate it with many positive memories. And then at TGP, once you factor in that during our school day, our kids have recess 2 times a day for 30 minutes. And so much of childhood development and healthy brain development is around play and is around social time with peers, because that's actually where you're building your social skills and your collaboration skills. And you're going to get into a lot of conflict, and then you're going to learn how to navigate it. And you do that at recess. And so we have recess 2 times a day. We have art for 45 minutes a day. We have wellness for 45 minutes a day. And so once you factor in all those different pieces, there's just a recognition of the experiences that our kiddos are having is much wider than what you would typically experience in a school. And you have the time for different parts of your body or your brain to like rest and regulate, because there's a different part of your interest or a different part of your humanity that you're actually getting to live out and experience on our campus.
Right. So if we're extrapolating from what my school experiences was and thinking about that as a long school day, I needed my after school time to do my hobbies. Growing up, my favorite hobby, and I eventually learned to tailor my own. It took a lot of time, to get skillful at that. And I would read books that I chose, like fantasy books, or I don't know, like spy thrillers that my teachers thought were too trashy, but it was my choice. I enjoyed it. I got to be a good reader. It served me well in law school. I could read cases really fast because all the spy novels I had read.
Nice.
Because I did not have choice on campus. I really needed my time at home to do the things I cared about. But if I had been able to use knives, use sewing machines, use hammers on campus, and if I was working on projects that my classmates and I had expressed an interest in, I think I would have a different attitude about what it's like to be on campus. So I was a good student in the sense that I did what I was supposed to do and I got good grades, but I did not have a good attitude. And I really didn't want to be there. And that kind of colors my attitude about schools now. And it's part of why I'm so motivated to break open the restrictions on what a school is supposed to be. Because I don't want other kids to have to just, kind of trudge through it the way I did. I want them to come out of it more excited and also more confident about themselves. I felt like I was always being told, no, you're not old enough, or no, we're not gonna do that yet. And then it's like, can I just get out of here? I'm done.
Can I go do the thing instead of being told that I'll do it later or something?
Yeah. No, I just graduated early. I was like, okay, can I just go to college now? I'm done.
Yeah.
But that's not the best solution, but it was the best option I had at the time. So, it makes sense what you're saying. If you're thoughtful about how kids spend their time on campus, then that length of day makes sense, and they're not coming out of it exhausted or glazed over. They're excited about what they get to do. So I always I've asked every school guest this year about the pandemic. What did you? I mean, I can't imagine what a hill you guys had to climb to be opening the school, and not even knowing what conditions would be like in August, when the school year would start, and not even getting that much support from TA about what the rules would be, and then just having to get the word out, without having to be able to have in-person events. And I mean, just like so many things you had to overcome. But then you guys had some things on your side, right? Like you mentioned the campus being so spacious, so much, like trees and fresh air. So I don't know. So if you could just, share some stories of highs and lows from the pandemic, and are there things that you discovered that like, hey, actually that worked, we're going to keep that?
Yeah, I'm happy to kick us off. So yes, you're absolutely right. We often laugh. Ryan and I are known for being very thorough, planning for all the curveballs, being ready for them. And we like laugh because we're like, oh, apparently the one curveball that we missed was a global pandemic. How could we? And I think the like laughter and the comedy and the sadness, all of that in that joke is I think what summarizes a lot of what the pandemic experience has been, is this need to constantly adapt, respond, be flexible. One of the other things that I've been saying is this school year was like living 5 Augusts. And for the educators who are listening, that August is one of your most difficult months as an educator and as a school, because it's for the first time a community's coming together and you are really starting everything from the ground up. And to us, we've lived 5 of them this school year. And we started off 100% virtual just based off of where the state of the pandemic was in San Antonio. And then in October, we had about 50% of our kids come back. Then we had another wave come back in January and another wave after spring break. And so we had our actual August, then we had our October August, we had our January August, we had our March August, and then we had our August after the week of like inclement weather and freezing. And I think that summarizes so much of what the school year has been. I think the wins, the highs, Inga, to use your language, is like if being a first year school is incredibly challenging. You're building, like there are no systems. You're building everything from the ground up. You're building capacity within every single team member. You're building a culture for the very first time for this community. And that takes a lot of work, and it's really hard. It's really challenging. It's also really fulfilling and really nourishing. And we did it in 2 spaces. We ran an in-person school, and then we had to build a virtual school from the ground up simultaneously. And to us, like when we as a school are able to overcome and find our way through such a difficult situation, imagine us when the pandemic is fully contained. Like this is how we earned our stripes. And then there's like some pieces that we've really learned well. For example, where the pandemic was in January of this year, we actually delayed the return to the start of the school year. We extended winter break by a week for our kids, but we turned it into an extra week of professional development for our staff. And we adored it. It was so powerful. It was so effective that is now permanently part of our school calendar. And so there are like pieces that we've learned. As to your question about the challenges, one of the biggest challenges is navigating a pandemic and recognizing that the science of the pandemic and the science of early childhood development are in direct opposition to each other. And we had to find our way through that of how were we going to live that. There's also a really big piece around so much of what's happening right now is brain development. Like my background's neuroscience, pre-everything. And our brains are developing at the age range of the kids that we serve right now, and having masks on means that half of the map, the visual map that we're using to understand emotions, to understand self-regulation and co-regulation with another human being, for literacy and phonics and knowing what letters make what sounds, so much of it is visual, and it's been blocked for an entire school year. And more than that, actually, considering that we went into quarantine last March. And so that has profound impacts on children's emotional skills, social skills, literacy skills. And I would also say that one of the other challenges is everyone's resiliency is actually down. People are running a lot more empty or near empty, both kids, caregivers, adults, staff, than what is typical. And that's a byproduct of how exhausting the pandemic is. Because while, yes, we're great at pivoting and being flexible, it's also very tiring for everyone involved. And I'll end it on a high note, which is I think the piece that we're most proud of during this pandemic is that we have lived our model. Like as a first year school, or as a school that's been in existence for a long time, this was the easy year to be like, we're not going to live our model. we're going to roll it down, we're going to double down, we're going to just do this and this and this. And we're very proud of the fact that like we brought our model, we brought the gathering place to life despite a pandemic, when a pandemic actually made it 10 times harder to bring into reality. And that's something that we're really proud of.
Yeah, the mask, one of the most heartbreaking moment of this year for me was, as a preface, I smile a lot. I am usually smiling, and I absolutely adore the gathering place and the community that's around it. And so when I'm here, I'm smiling extra frequently and big. And I was walking, we have this long walkway connecting two of our buildings, and I had taken my mask off because no one was around me. And as I was walking, one of our kids was walking the opposite direction. And we were far enough apart to where I had a second to put my mask on, but I went ahead and waved and said hi. And then I went and put my mask on. As I was walking by, she like waved back at me and said, "I've never seen you smile before." And it was like the stab to the heart. And it was said so nonchalantly, like it was so, I think that we sometimes grow numb or immune to the severity of what's happened over this last year. But to imagine that a kid at a school that has never seen adults that love them so much and love being with them so much smile, I think it was a anecdote that put in context a turbulent year.
Yeah. I think another piece to share there too. I think another anecdote that's also very powerful about how kids perceive themselves. We obviously do a lot of work around equity, which also means that we do a lot of work around identity. And so classes at different parts of the school year have done work around self-portraits, around self-image, and our kiddos will be drawing themselves. And responding to questions of like, what is most authentically you? And they draw themselves with masks. And so like their image of themselves, their image of who they are is a child with a mask on. And I think that also just really summarizes what the world looks and feels like for our children.
Yeah. That, I noticed that with my own kids. Well, it's like, okay, so I'm 44. So the pandemic is not, percentage wise, not that much of my like sentient experience on Earth, right? So I have lots of clear memories of pre-pandemic life. But so my kids are 11 and 13, and my 13-year-old, he's got pretty clear memories, especially if it involves food, right? So if you ask him like what restaurants does he miss, like he will give you very clear answers. But my daughter, who's 11, like this is actually a pretty big chunk of her life, and like the person she was when the pandemic started and the person she is now, I mean, it's been a lot of change for her. And there are like, so one thing that my family was known for kind of before the pandemic was like just going lots of places. Like if you check out my Instagram, it's like we just go lots of, we're always curious, we're always restless, we're trying new things. But there's places we haven't been to for a couple of years, and I'll say, oh, do you want to go back to this? Like, do you miss like, oh, do you want to go back to New Braunfels? And then my daughter's like, I don't really remember that. And I'm like, oh gosh, like I realized like, oh, you were like 7 when we went. Like, it's not as strong a memory at that age. And then when I think about like the students at the gathering place, like, if they're right, I mean, like
20% of their life, 25% of their life.
Yeah. That is stunning. So like most of their conscious time on Earth has been spent during the pandemic. And then like I have friends who have 2-3-year-old kids who have no memories of the world before the pandemic. Like this is the world they live in. This is all they will ever know. I just hope that it becomes a better world than it was or that it has been, because it breaks my heart to think about them not experiencing a sort of a carefree world that it used to be carefree, but with underlying injustice that we can't tolerate. So those stories. Yeah. Well, I hope that we get to a place where they can see Ryan smile all the time and where the kids can draw pictures of themselves with big smiles and not necessarily with masks. Yeah. Wow. Okay. Well, I want to give you guys a chance for closing thoughts, but I always like to, I hope that the caregivers who've been listening to this, have a stronger sense of what the Gathering Place is about. And I always like to pop up the website so that folks can, it's thegatheringplacek12.org. I hope that they're, excited about it, curious, maybe wondering how they can get their kids enrolled. So if y'all have some more details about that, like, how people can take action.
Yeah, absolutely. Head to the website, so conveniently displayed below the 3 boxes that we are speaking through. And there is a button up in the top menu that says enroll. And you can fill out a super quick application, just a couple of fields. And our enrollment team is actually current caregivers. And so you will have a caregiver from the Gathering Place right now that will reach out to you pretty quickly and talk to you a little bit more about the school, answer any questions you have. And hopefully get you started filling out the registration paperwork and getting you signed up. We are going to be grades K through 3 next year. So we're K2 this year. We add a grade level each year. And we are on a wait list right now for rising first graders, but we have I think we have like close to 30 open spots in kindergarten, and then a handful of open spots for rising second and third graders. So go ahead and get the application in. Even if you're a rising first grader, go ahead and get on the wait list. It moves a lot over the summer. People shift and everything. So we would love for you to get a chance to learn more about our school, connect with our caregivers, and hopefully get to meet your children at our school in August.
Yeah, that's great. That's the practical details. But I want to give you guys a chance. This is such a mission-driven school that I want to give you both a chance to kind of offer closing thoughts, about the school, or about kind of like a call to action for the caregivers who are listening to this video. I know you guys are like very dedicated people, and like you love the students in your class. You love San Antonio. You want to support, the community and making this a better place.
Sure. I'll share my closing thoughts. And maybe like my parting words to all the caregivers who are listening tonight, and a huge thank you for joining us tonight, is so much of the Gathering Place is actually about unlearning. We have so many habits that have been conditioned in us. We have so many ways in which we move through society, what school should look like, what should it be, what is success defined as, that has all been, again, conditioned. These are all things that we have learned. And so much of the Gathering Place, whether it's for our kids, our staff, our caregivers, our community that we serve, it is actually settling into a multi-year journey of unlearning. And really questioning every paradigm that you subscribe through, every methodology of thinking. It's questioning, do I really believe in this? Do I want to have this as a part of my life? Is this the only way to do X, Y, Z? Or are there other ways of doing this? And so definitely, if you come join the Gathering Place, or for our current caregivers, as you all well know, the Gathering Place is an entire experience in unlearning. And we often think about the fact that we are bringing something into reality that has never been seen before. So we are a constant work in progress. We're constantly iterating. We'll do things, we'll see how they go, and we'll go like, we need to tweak this a little bit, and now we're going to change it. Or sometimes we try something and go, you know what, this isn't actually serving the mission, or this isn't heading in the direction which we really hoped. And so we'll dismantle it and rebuild anew. And so we're just a constant work in progress. And I think there's such a beauty in that, because so many of the systems I grew up in as a student, the systems where I learned to teach in much of my education career, they were very stagnant systems. It was, how do we continue doing exactly what we've been doing, versus being part of a startup, being part of an incredibly innovative startup where there is so much unlearning and there's so much simultaneous building. And I think that really summarizes like who we are at the Gathering Place, which is, again, that constant awareness, action, reflection. And it's a cycle that never ends. And it's one that we hope never ends. Like, we don't actually ever want to become stagnant and established, because it means we will have stopped doing the important work.
Beautifully said. My only addition to that is there was a really interesting study done over the course of several years across multiple cities and states, where they interviewed kindergartners and first graders and asked them if they self-identified as being creative. And over 90% of kids did. And they asked the same question to seniors in high school, and less than 8% did. there is something about the inner brilliance of each person. There is something about seeing yourself as an agent of change, as an agent of creation, of being able to create and build, that gets lost in school. And it's not because of one teacher or one principal or one school. It's because of the things that our current system of education value. And we as a school very outright disagree with the value system that is what most schools are built on, one that's centered around competition, one that's centered around pushing children out that don't conform, one that's centered around testing. Instead, we believe that the center value is the inner brilliance of every child. It's why we have the mission statement that we have. That does create, you have to unlearn a lot, and it creates a very different model of education, but it's one that at its center is about seeing and really connecting with and supporting each child for who they are. And we also, it's Teacher Appreciation Week. I'd be remiss without naming that I believe that we have the most brilliant and powerful staff that I've ever seen in a school. We intentionally have a very rigorous hiring process that is really about bringing on people that have those shared beliefs. And when you have, we've got a staff of 55 this year, we'll be growing a lot more next year. When you have 55 people that are all rowing in the same direction, that are all compelled by supporting and nurturing the inner brilliance of children, it creates a momentum, and it creates an environment for kids that really is groundbreaking, and that we're very proud of.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I'm really happy that the Gathering Place is part of the ecosystem of schools in San Antonio, and that it's an option for families, because there was a great need for that, and I hope that it inspires other educators, whether they want to become teachers at the Gathering Place, or if they want to go out and found their own schools or after school programs or camps or whatever, but just like Asha said, keep challenging your assumptions and keep unlearning the things that are holding you back, because we all have some of that work to do.
Yes, and a huge thank you to you, Inga, and for this space, for the space that you really brought into existence for collaboration, for conversation, for dialogue, for debates, and creating that space for more and more of our San Antonio families to really learn and understand all the different options, and really figure out and question what would be the best fit for my child. And so also thank you and your team for the time tonight and all of the work that happens and is often happens unseen to even create the space. So thank you.
Well, that is much appreciated, but it's given me purpose and joy during the pandemic to know that we're still helping families. I do look forward to having in-person events someday. So yeah, I'll throw some dates at you guys about in the fall, when it's time for more school discovery days and stuff like that. That'll be fun.
Please.
Yeah. Okay. Well, this has been great. I'm excited to share this video with our online community, and Teacher Appreciation Week. So many thanks to the teachers at the Gathering Place.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Okay, take care. Bye.
Have a good night. Bye, y'all.